Have you ever been like at a family gathering and your one weird cousin starts talking about some crazy thing that she claims is scientific, and all you can think is, that's got to be paranormal? That's not scientific. You might be wrong. Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff and Joe the scientist explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lynn and...
I'm Joe.
So we get messages all the time about suggestions for topics to cover. Mostly it's listeners who want us to do the research to either prove, disprove, or declare something is paranormal. Here are a few of those topics. Have you heard of EMDR?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I can't think of what the acronym stands for.
Okay, it stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing.
Yeah, okay.
It involves moving your eyes a specific way while you process traumatic memories. Okay, that sounds so woo to me that somebody, presumably some kind of healthcare provider, has you tell the story of some traumatic situation you've been in while moving their finger or something around, and you're supposed to follow it with your eyes, and this is supposed to help you process it. That just sounds like
it does.
BS.
It does sound. So to me, it sounds a little like it wouldn't work because frequently you are, like, just in your daily life, you're recounting a story while you're moving.
Right.
And so your eyes will be moving while you're doing that. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't work. It's just, it doesn't seem like it would work.
So it does. It involves moving your eyes specific ways while you process those traumatic memories, and it helps you heal from trauma and other distressing life experiences. It turns out that it can help people with a wide range of mental health conditions. Teenagers, adults, really all ages, as long as they can follow with their eye, can benefit from this treatment. Some healthcare providers also specialize in EMDR for children. So the creator of EMDR was a lady named, I shouldn't say lady, although she was a lady, but she was a doctor named Francine Shapiro, and she developed a working theory about how your brain stores memories after she accidentally discovered that eye movement, this eye movement technique that she built this whole thing around, made a difference. And so she created this therapy. It doesn't matter whether you and I think it works or not. Dozens of controlled trials and research studies have analyzed EMDR, and they know that it's effective. It absolutely is effective.
Do they have a causal mechanism?
Well, here's where it gets into, like, is this just like
a placebo?
Yeah, is it just placebo? Okay, so it does have some drawbacks.
Interesting, because there's nothing to it, so...
Right. It only works with conditions related to traumatic experiences. It does not help with like mental health conditions that are because of an inherited condition or a physical injury.
So it's entirely related to memories.
It's entirely related to memories of a traumatic event.
Yeah.
Why it still works is still theoretical.
So if it's a traumatic event, there are certain parts of your brain, as far as I understand, that handle different things specifically. So like traumatic events, there's a part of your brain that handles emotion. Mm-hmm. And so if the EMDR or whatever didn't work with like processing a happy memory, then it makes me think then it's some interaction in your brain with that particular area. Yeah,
and the Dr. Francine Shapiro, who developed it, said that it was specifically about how your brain stores memories. So probably if I had time to dive deeper into it or was inclined, I'd probably discover that is exactly what she was talking about. Specifically traumatic memories, how they're stored. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So they really don't know exactly why it works. They have theories, but they don't have proof, probably because proof would require really kind of invasive techniques.
And it's pretty difficult to prove things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, proof would be, I'm not even sure what proof would really look like. I mean, you have to rule out the other theories, and in order to do that, you have to find something that the theory doesn't, all the other theories don't you know?
Yeah, that they don't accomplish, so that you can isolate that one thing.
Yeah.
So this was only created or formalized or whatever, or maybe it was just named in 1989. So it's relatively new, relatively recent. There are other forms of therapy that have been in use for much longer, and those are usually the ones that care providers rely on. So EMDR, while it has been proven to work in controlled studies, they don't know why it works, so a lot of people don't actually offer it. But there are care providers that do.
That's funny,
and
because we don't know how virtually any of it works.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So they say it's a long-term solution, and it as of right now, so since 1989, it said it seems to still have created a long-term curative solution for decades. So these people are still experiencing curative powers.
So there's some that involve medications. So like the beta blockers with phobias, which you told me about. So you give somebody beta blockers just before they fall asleep.
Yeah.
Is it beta blockers? I think so.
I think so.
Because that inhibits like
the formation of
stress responses, right?
Yeah.
So while they're asleep, they replay traumatic memories. I think there's something like they have to experience.
I think you're supposed to recall the traumatic memory.
Something like
right
that. So you're supposed to recall it, then you take the beta blocker, go to sleep. Your brain replays the memory, but because you're on beta blockers, your body's stress response is not engaged. Right. And so when your mind re-encodes the memory, which it does every time it accesses it, it doesn't then re-encode the stress response.
Yes.
That's the causal mechanism, at least. So it supposedly works.
Dr. Huberman is his specialty is eyes, because they're part of your brain. So he studies the brain and he studies the eyes. And one of the things he talked about, and I have such a bad memory, so I don't know all the details of it, but as I recall, forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but as I recall, he was talking about how when you walk, your eyes are scanning back and forth where you're walking, and it does something different in your brain than walking like on a treadmill, staring straight ahead blankly because you're listening to a podcast.
I think I remember something like there's a flow pattern. So the activation of neurons is actually moving because there's similar features moving across your eye in a predictable pattern, and so that causes particular effects on your brain.
So just in that one instance, obviously EDMR is not the same as that, but that just shows that your sight is affecting your brain. And so, okay. So I have no doubt they're going to figure out why it works, and it definitely works. So the next one was aromatherapy. Now, I kind of buy into aromatherapy and have for a long time, but not in the way that a lot of people do, like they almost give it magical properties. I've always felt like there's something to it. There's just something to it.
I have to say, aromatherapy, I always just chunked the phrase into essentially one word. And it's like aromatherapy is just the name you call it, the thing what you call it when you put scents in a pot and it makes the room smell good. And it was never like, oh, therapy, what?
Okay, aromatherapy is one word. I don't know whether you're remembering back before it was a coined word, but aromatherapy is one word, and it is kind of like that. There are companies that came out with these aromatherapy lines, essential oils, and to really, make their sales better, they started saying they could do all these different things. Like if you smell this one scent, it will have this effect on your brain, and you do this other thing, you rub this on there, and all these other things. And it started sounding like a bunch of BS to me. So I never really looked into that too much. For me, it's more how scents will cause you to have almost instant recall of emotions. Yeah. And so that's really how I've used it. But according to John Hopkins Medicine, aromatherapy really does have some scientific backbone. So aromatherapy is the practice of using essential oils for a therapeutic benefit. To me, it was just like you said, aromatherapy is just sniffing the good scents,
Yeah.
It's just, let's
Yeah,
just
it's
sniff
just a
it. It
name
just
they
smells
say
good.
for smelling
Yeah.
good things.
But this is actually about therapeutic benefit. And it's been used for centuries. Probably as soon as they started being able to distill the aromatic oils out of plants, they discovered that it
So the
evoked
idea,
something.
so it's not like, oh, I'm doing aromatherapy, I'm making my room smell good. It's like you're going to smell something, and then that will have an effect.
Yeah.
And the effect is some desirable effect.
Right.
Like it will put you in a particular mood,
Or it will cure some disorder you've
So
got.
it's literally therapy.
It's therapeutic, literally.
Therapeutic with smells.
Yes. So when inhaled, the scent molecules in the essential oils travel from your nose, where you're smelling it, directly to your brain.
Directly to your
brain, and they affect the olfactory nerves, and especially impact the amygdala.
Interesting. Well, I know that that there's essentially like a short wire from your nose to your midbrain, I think. So like your amygdala responds directly to signals from your nose. It's not like, oh, it's processed somewhere else.
It's direct.
So it would be like this. Your neocortex, which is like the part that really defines a human in their brain, that part has nothing to do with the signal from nose to midbrain or whatever. It's like you could remove all that other stuff and you would still have the same reaction. It's also why you'll have strong memories of particular smells, because it's more directly connected to memory centers in your brain.
And the amygdala is the emotional center of the brain.
So it makes sense that smelling things...
But still, that's emotional therapy. We're not...
True.
There's actually medical therapy, because that still sounds kind of woo. Okay, so I smell the lavender. It reminds me of something when I was a kid, like washing my hands at Aunt Barbara's house because she always had lavender soap and makes me feel good, whatever. That's not therapeutic, except at maybe an emotional level.
Well, so I should say that would be as good as like talk therapy.
Right. But John Hopkins found that certain essential oils could kill a type of Lyme bacteria better than antibiotics. And a 2023 study that was referenced on PubMed, which is the government repository of medical studies, they're abstracts of medical studies. This study was also published in Frontiers in Immunology, which is a very well-renowned place to get your papers published. And they found that inhaling menthol being the aromatic oil that is found in peppermint, mint, all those type of plants. So inhaling menthol, not like the oil, you're not going to inhale the oil, you're going to inhale the scent. It can improve cognitive function in mice and in mouse models of Alzheimer's disease. The study also found that menthol inhalation can reduce levels of interleukin-1 beta, which is a protein that causes inflammation, and it's linked to better cognitive function. So it reduces inflammation in your brain, which may be causing you to have some issue with cognition. It also helps with memory.
See, this is the kind of thing, like, I really wish that there was a cause model that went with that, because it's like, okay, if, like you said earlier about the bacteria, certain scents kill bacteria. It's not like, oh, the bacteria is smelling the scent and it just hates and dies.
It's whatever the active ingredient is in the aromatic oil.
Yeah, so you could take the bacteria, put them in a petri dish, take that compound and put it in the petri dish, and it would kill it like a chemical.
I think that's how they're determining that it is more effective than the antibiotic.
Yeah. But so like with this, like you can't do that when it's something like...
well, they can do it on the mice.
So you can't do that. You cannot take like your cells or something, put them in a petri dish, and put the chemical on them, and it shows, oh, look, they're activating really strongly. And so that's the reason why you have a nootropic effect or whatever. It's a correlation. So you have this super complex system that you can't isolate individual components of. You do something to it, and you see it change in a predictable way. You can't say why it's changing.
Well, this is true. Although they did determine, and probably through Petri dish type of things, or injecting them into mice and then looking at the mice brains after they did this, but that it reduced the levels of interleukin-1 beta, which is that protein that causes inflammation.
Yeah, so that's why I say why. Why does it do that? Why does it have, positive effects? Because if you can explain why, then you can isolate that.
Right.
And then you can actually prove it. You can say it's not like,
well, they're still doing studies to try and determine this.
Yeah,
and they really feel like these findings suggest that odors, the actual just smells, may play a role in prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's and other central nervous diseases. And we see from the other one about the stopping the Lyme disease that there may be all kinds of ways.
Again, it's like, it isn't just smelling it. So it's like there's two components here. Let's say you have Lyme disease, whatever, in your body. It's a bacteria. You inject the stuff in your veins, and that kills it. Okay, you don't have to smell it,
Yeah, except that maybe you do have to smell it if you're trying to get it directly into your brain, to your olfactory.
Yeah, so if the Lyme bacteria is all over your body, and you want to kill it via that chemical, so you probably inject it. It's not just the smell, but just like I said, a complex system. That means a system you cannot make a simple model for. There's a correlation there. You do something, you get a certain effect, statistical effect. That doesn't mean you can't just keep using it.
Yeah.
If you put any credence into like talk therapy, meditation, exercise for mental health, anything like that, what that is there's no causal mechanism that's just like a simple, it's like endorphins or something. It's your brain is this complex system. You're doing something, and there's no even pretext that there is a simple causal model.
Right.
It is complex from the get-go throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
So like talk therapy, that involves everything in your brain interacting. You can't reduce it past that point, You could make a very hyper complex description of what's going on in one person's brain when you do it, but you can't generalize that to everyone's brain. There's perhaps some level you can do that, but like you smell something. Is there any simple explanation for it, or is it entirely is it in the same class of thing as like talk therapy?
Okay, well, I would say that there are people who are really into aromatherapy who believe that there is something to do with it because they do it with their babies, and their babies have an effect.
So it's like the placebo effect. The placebo effect is completely valid.
But
if
a baby
you can
wouldn't
predictably
know.
do it. There you see, it's like, okay, here you have a baby. Again, you have a complex system. There's a lot of context for a complex system to make the thing work, the effect work.
Yeah.
Okay, this complex system needs to have been exposed to the idea of, someone need to say to it in the past, yes, this will work,
Well, I think this is tremendously exciting that they're even looking into it because it opens up a whole different realm of ways that possibly their lives can be improved. So I have I have two more.
Okay.
And I'm going to go over them pretty fast.
Okay.
Have you heard about Reiki? You know what Reiki is, right?
Is that the one where they poke you with needles?
No, Reiki is a Japanese technique for stress reduction and relaxation that promotes healing. It's basically just laying on of hands. Sometimes they don't even put their hands on you, they put their hands over you. And the idea is that there is an unseen life force energy that flows through us and causes us to be alive, and they're helping align it. So it sounds pretty woo. I've had people do Reiki on me. I've kind of done Reiki, but I haven't been formally trained. But I kind of did that a little bit with the Amish people because they want very much to have energy work done. And it felt like something was happening. And they claimed that they were receiving something. And when I had it done to me, it felt like something was happening. But it felt like something was happening more on an emotional level than a cellular level. That makes sense. But the National Institute of Health, they have a study on there, somebody's abstract about a study that was done about Reiki. And they concluded, after examining other people's studies results, as well as their own study results, so that they took a lot of data from a lot of different places, they concluded that Reiki is better than a placebo and has a broad potential as a complementary health therapy. They said it's safe and gentle, and this is why. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and which helps heal the body and mind. The parasympathetic nervous system is also driven, not necessarily, I mean, it can be driven just by emotions.
Yeah, so just real quick. So something like that is completely useful if you can consistently get the effect when they do it. So like, for instance, it's not like, oh, I'm in a mood where I don't think it will work, so I go in, they do it, and it didn't work. That's no longer useful when I can't consistently get it.
So, several years ago, when I was still a licensed midwife, every 3 years I had to have a certain number of continuing education units to be able to have my license renewed and my certification renewed. So this is, I don't know, so I say several years ago, who knows how many years ago it was a while back. There was one of the classes that was offered was in the laying on of hands for nurses. And I thought, that's pretty weird, because the laying on of hands I've always thought of as being more of a religious thing. And I looked into it, and their rationale was that people have got away from touching other people. And so they were teaching nurses or care providers, healthcare providers, to deliberately touch people in a specific way. And it did not involve God. It did not involve, any kind of religious thing. But that alone, according to their studies, made a difference in the person's trajectory of healing. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So they weren't calling it Reiki. They were just calling it laying on of hands.
Touching.
Just touching, yeah. Just basically that's all it was. Because people don't touch people. And if you think about it, and it's been a while since you actually were in a medical situation where somebody was doing medical things to you, procedures to you, but they're gloved, they're always gloved. And people don't just like put their hand on your shoulder or anything anymore, partly because it can be misconstrued as being an offensive act, partly also because you're trying to put the whole situation elevated into another realm, to use a bad term, of professionalism. And so you take out that human touch. And so this was an effort to put it back in. So I thought that was interesting. But the fact that the National Institute of Health included that abstract of that study, I thought that was pretty good, and that they came back, their results came back saying it was better than a placebo for helping people feel better. So that's good. And the last one here is mental rehearsal. You and I both, we've talked about this before. We know that works. And we know that huge companies, the Air Force, everybody is taking advantage of this quirkiness of our brains, that if you practice something mentally, you actually become better at it when you do it. The idea is that you imagine doing something, and you imagine doing it well. So it's a mental skills training technique that world-class athletes, medical professionals, the Air Force, probably astronauts too, because they have to practice that stuff. It trains you just by imagining those things. And then the result is it increases your readiness, your confidence, your resilience, and your focus when you go into a challenging situation. And it can be helpful as a stress management tool and reduce anxiety or other things other negative feelings that might go along with being in a stressful situation, nervousness and stuff like that. All it involves is you visualize or imagine, to those people who can't visualize. So you imagine yourself successfully going through a routine or a process or an event multiple times. Even though you're not doing the action, you're just laying still or sitting still, you're going through practicing as if you're doing it in your brain. And studies show that the next time you go and do the actual thing, you are better at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know I've done that in the past, and I can't really say whether or not, like, I can't say counterfactually if I didn't do it that I would be worse.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, so it felt like it made it more obvious that, I mean, it was like, I don't want to say it made me more comfortable with it, because that makes me feel, it seems like an emotional thing, but it's like you do something so much, it feels more natural when you do it.
Right.
And if you do it mentally, it's the same thing.
Yeah. I think it's pretty fascinating. So out of all of these things, which at first glance might seem like they're woo, you know, they're like BS. It's not scientific, it's paranormal, or, you know, coming from somebody's imagination or whatever. The most remarkable thing that I get out of this is that science is proving this stuff is real. And so when you say to me, how could the ghost turn the knob on the radio? How could the ghost make the phone ring? How could this happen? How could that happen? Well, I don't know, but I know that someday they'll figure it out. Our contact information is in the show notes. You can email us, text us, you can even call us and leave a 3-minute voicemail. The phone number is in the show notes or the description, depending upon what platform you're listening to this on. And as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us, or a question, or you have one of these things that, you know, you're thinking, is this even real? We'll dig into it. I don't know that you'll like what we come up with, but we'll dig into it. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.
You can't smell cinnamon.
I wonder what cinnamon does.
It makes you want to shop. That's what they used to say.
What?
That's why they all had the cinnamon smelling shops.
Christina has all those cinnamon brooms in her house.
Oh,
Oh my God.